Good evening and welcome. I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Glendora City Council at 6 p.m. tonight. Three of my colleagues are here. Mr. Thompson is not here this evening, and our city attorney, Mr. Winder, is joining us remotely, so welcome. With that, I will ask you to read the closed session title into the record before I go to public comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council, and any who may be joining your meeting either in person or virtually. There are two closed session agenda topics tonight, one of which has three subsections. The first involves labor negotiations with the city's AFSCME unit, the General Management Unit, and the Glendora Police Management Unit. The authority to meet and talk about these labor negotiations is Government Code Section 54957.6. The City Council is also going to talk about three matters involving real property negotiations, where price and terms of payment or sale will be discussed. The authority to meet in closed session is Government Code Section 54956.8. The three real properties are identified in the printed agenda for tonight's meeting, and each are identified by their assessor parcel number or numbers. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Winder. With that, I will open the public comment. We do not have any public comment cards. Do we have anyone on Zoom wishing to comment on the closed session items tonight?
No raised hands, no public comment cards that have been received either.
And do we have any emails regarding these?
Via the public comment email.
Okay, seeing none, then I will close public comment and convene the meeting into closed session at 6:02 p.m. This time, we'd like to reconvene our council meeting back into open session, and I'll invite our city attorney who's joining us via Zoom to report us out from closed session. Mr. Winder.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council, and any who are participating in this meeting either in person or virtually. City Council had a very busy hour in closed session. The City Council met in closed session to confer regarding labor negotiations with its AFSCME General Unit, its Glendora Management Association, and its Glendora Police Management Association. City staff and city negotiators reported having just received shortly before the start of this meeting an initial partial proposal from the AFSCME General Bargaining Unit. That proposal was reviewed by staff with the council, but no action was requested or taken until staff has a time to further evaluate and report back to the council on a recommended response or responses to the same. There was a quick status report on Glendora Police Management Association negotiations. The bulk of our time was spent reviewing the Glendora Management Association proposal. A recommended response to that proposal suggested to the council by the city's labor negotiators. Questions were asked and answered about that proposal, and the council unanimously authorized city staff to go forward with the city's proposal in response to the Glendora Management Association proposal, with Councilmember Thompson absent. When it came to real property negotiations, there was a quick status report with respect to the Dale property road. There was a quick status report with respect to the city property that will be coming before the city council at a future meeting to declare the property surplus. With respect to the so-called McGuey Trust property, the city staff reported that the owners of that property had made a counter offer to the proposal made by city staff to acquire that property. That counter proposal was reviewed by the city's negotiators, and the council unanimously agreed in principle to buy that property under terms and conditions which will be brought back for public consideration and action in a purchase and sale agreement. Two members of the council approved the counter proposal from the property owner. Councilmember Alowis voted no, the mayor pro tem abstained, and Councilmember Thompson was absent. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. With that, we will move on from closed session to our regular meeting tonight. As noted, Mr. Thompson is not here this evening and Mr. Winder is joining us via Zoom. Tonight, our invocation will be led by Pastor Alan DeVries of Glendora Community Church, and our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by a member or members of the undefeated Charter Oak football team. So with that, Pastor DeVries.
Thank you. First, thank you for your service to our community and for the honor of this invocation. Thank you for that. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we thank you for all our civil servants. We thank you for their hard work and sacrifice. Would you continually bless them and generously give to each of them wise and discerning hearts to skillfully govern the people in our city. Give them power to do what is right and to rule in fairness. Give the mayor, city leaders, staff, and city council wisdom so that they may solve problems, distinguish between right and wrong, bring order, stability, and prosperity to our community. May your wisdom produce in us creative ideas and solutions to problems, that we may be of good counsel and good judgment and help us make good decisions. May you also give us greater knowledge and understanding to give back what is good and excellent to our community. And may our Glendora community be known for its charity and justice. Let it always prosper from the influence of good men and women. Lord, give your people in our community a spirit of unity as we follow you, so that with one heart and mind, we may work together for the good of our city and the glory of your name. And give us humility, Lord. Let all barriers, walls, strongholds, and divisions that keep us separated from you and from one another come down. In Jesus' name we pray it. Amen.
Thank you for having us. My name is Mubarak Odabi, and I'll be doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Please put your right hand on your heart, and we may begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda, student reports, which we have none tonight. Next is reordering of or additions to the agenda. I would like to reorder the agenda to have item 6 be right after item 4. Is there any objection? Okay, thank you. Then that takes us to public comment. If you wish to speak tonight, I invite you to fill out a public comment card, and we'll also recognize those on Zoom who are wishing to speak. Do we have any public comment cards? Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Dennis Willett.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for allowing me to come before you this evening. Again, I bring up the subject of BlackRock and Wall Street Journal. The article is stated October the 10th. And again, it involves our pension fund and what is going on with our pension fund and BlackRock. It was a very devastating article. And each of the council member will be giving a copy of this today or tonight. It continues that, again, BlackRock wants to stop all fossil fuel oil drilling. Again, Calipers, our pension fund, is greatly aligned with BlackRock, as we now know, through another company called Engine One, as well as Vanguard and a political State Street, another financial company. Anyway, moving right along. We continue to have great problems of people being able to afford gasoline and groceries. It's only getting worse. As you well know, the stock is again down, down, down. We're getting negative news every day. I'd like to switch the subject matter for a moment. I got this sticking on my car tonight. Trim my tree tomorrow, the 12th. I have an oak tree next to my water out front of my house. And the oak tree keeps causing me great leaks. Michael, nothing being done about it. I reported it to the city manager. He did nothing about it. Across the street, he removed 2 oak trees that were not necessary to remove, other than the fact he wanted his kids to have a sidewalk, what I was told. This oak tree needs to be removed. It's caused great water leaks at my house. As you know well, I'm handicapped and I have to have water. And every week I have infusion at my house. I have nursing all the time there. I need water. For over a week, 2 weeks ago, it was leaking and caused another water leak. The roots from the oak tree are hitting my water line. And we've had to replace this water line. The city manager has done nothing about it. The people he sends out don't understand. It's like when a tree root lifts up a sidewalk, they send the city crew out to replace the sidewalk and cut the roots out. My thing is we have a huge amount of force pushing against my water line, as well as the water meter. And then the water meter cracked and started leaking again. I need this oak tree removed, Michael, and I get daily debris all the time from it. Leaves, sap, everything. City manager looks the other way.
Mr. Willett.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Please help me, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Willett. Kamal Stefan.
Glendora City Council. You know, I just received by mail the budget for Glendora City. In the budget, the city manager paid $480,000. I Googled about the governor. The governor, he gets paid $177 or $180 his salary. The city manager, $480,000. That's insane. I can't believe it. And then you have down here transfer of $3,057,000. Where is transfer to your account or where? Can somebody answer me for this, or whoever prepared this finance things? This is really ridiculous. I mean, I've been accountant all my life. I never seen a budget like this in my life. Transfer like it looked like somebody just to fill the numbers. But again, my question is that right? The city manager get paid $450,000? What he turn Glendora to Vegas? The second issue about the drought. I wrote a letter to the governor, a proposal, and I received a very nice response from the governor looking at this issue. And soon we are going to meet him. I'm not going to tell you who, but I have ex-employees, they work in the county in the water department. So we are waiting the response from him. The other issue, Mr. Allows, the park. We are not going in anymore in the park in the evening because it turns that park is for animals and for soccer games, because the dog training is 2, twice or 3 times a week. I went to San Dimas Park. We are going there. And I met 2 city councils, and they were very, very nice. And I asked them if it's okay to come, because normally I take my dog there. I said, no problem. But what happened to the park? I said, well, the park is turning to dog training and soccer. He said, no way. We will never let anything like this happen. They have a special place fenced where people, they can play softball or whatever it is. But soccer and animal, I'm just drawing your attention. Is that fair? Because park is park for families, not for animals. So I don't know what is your comments to that extent. And third thing, I believe that election is coming, and I hope you are not running again. I hope we have to see a new faces, because enough is enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stefan. Do we have any other public comment cards?
Thank you. No other cards have been received. We do have one raised hand on the Zoom participants from Joe Cena. Joe, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, good evening. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. Joe Cena here, President and CEO of the Glendora Chamber of Commerce. Sorry I'm not there live with you, but I wanted to see State Senator Portantino's program on student loans, since I have 2 people in my house in college, so wanted to check that out. The Chamber's been busy, as we usually are, in talking about legislation recently, especially. Our Legislative Action Committee did hold the school board forum, which for those that haven't viewed it, which several thousand people have so far, it is on the Chamber's YouTube page, youtube.com/Glendora Chamber. We also tried to do a state and federal forum, but it just didn't work out. We couldn't get everyone together, so that's why you don't see that out there. And then at our last ledge meeting, we did go through each of the propositions, got all the details for those, and we will be putting out social media posts and emails, kind of giving you the basic idea of what each proposition is and how you can vote for it. Then on the personal side, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Glendora Tartan Marching Band, since I'm a new booster there. They had their first parade competition this past Saturday. The band got first place, scored in the low 90s, which is very good for a band. And the drill team and drum major both got second place. So thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Cena. Is there anyone else on Zoom wishing to speak at this time?
No other requests have been submitted, and no emails through the public comment email as well.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will close public comment and bring it back to the council for statements. Mr. Alawas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Adam, can you address some of these issues here? What is our policy with dealing with city trees and the pruning of them?
The tree in question, a couple of things stated by Mr. Willett. The tree in question is actually on his neighbor's property. The city's been out there on several occasions to test the status of the tree to ensure it's okay. We had a challenge where roots were cut inappropriately, and a water apparatus or main meter has been replaced previously, as have water line improvements on the private side of the meter, not on the public side. Additionally, the property across the street, those oak trees were removed not to add a sidewalk, because there is no sidewalk in front of that house, but to straighten out the city street where the homeowner did improvements to the city street, where there was an oak tree that came out to improve safety on the street in that regard. So city trees, when we go out, we have 2 arborists on staff that will go out and inspect any city tree. We have a manual that's about 150 pages long, if you care to read it, on how city trees are taken a look at and cared for. We periodically trim them. There's differences between oak trees and palm trees and the whole 9 yards. So it's the urban forestry manual, and that is how we do our business as it relates to trees.
And can you or Marie address the $3 million transfer?
Sure, happy to do so. So the document in question is actually mailed out to everyone who has a water bill. It is our overview of all the city's funds. The city manager designation actually is under a category clearly labeled as departments. So in the city manager's office, there are 3 staff members in the city manager's office. The total expenditures in that exhibit are about 37.8 million, the largest of which is the police department at 19 million. And it breaks it out. Transfers. So the city's in its discretionary funding pays for things like utilities and IT and liability insurance and risk management, which we'll hear this evening. So the total cost in that category is considered a transfer out of our discretionary funding pot of money, which totals about 3.5 million. So those are expenses paid for by that fund.
And can you or Mr. Aguirre talk about the Gladstone Park,
Sure.
the users?
Sure. John can come on up and talk about our challenges in parks in general, but also how we address use of the city parks.
That's what happens when you show up for council meetings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. We have had staff out there go out continuously and run the soccer leagues that are there. They're from Ontario and Upland. So we have been down there running them out. They have been there and we show up on certain nights that they're there, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I think. The dog place, they do rent an area from us and have their dog class there. They go from Gladstone to Finkbeiner and use of that. Those dogs are on leash and doing their classes. But we have made contact with somebody else down at Gladstone, and she'll call us, and then Annie Warner and staff go down and check that and have kicked people off the facility.
Have we had any issues with the mulch traveling where it's not supposed to be?
I have not been down there. So I know that they're still planting and stuff. When I drive by, I see it, and I haven't seen it out onto the grass area.
Wonderful. Thank you, John.
Mhm.
And for the question about the election cycle, the mayor and myself were unopposed, so we had canceled the election for this last cycle. On some other news, this weekend, we're going to have over at Heritage Park, the Pumpkin Festival, this Saturday at from 10 to 3. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Frieden.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, John. It's always nice to hear the shared use of our parks, and obviously if people are homesteading when they shouldn't be, and being on top of that is wonderful. Speaking of parks, on Saturday, October 22nd in Big Dalton Canyon at what used to be the Big Dalton picnic area or campground area, Saturday, the 22nd at 9:30 in the morning, an action that was taken by the council several months ago and worked very hard by the Community Services Department. The dedication of the new renaming of the park and amphitheater to the Rowley Wilderness Amphitheater is going to be conducted. We invite the community to come share in that exciting and worthwhile opportunity. So it's a very well-deserved tribute to a couple in the community that gave a lifetime to Glendora. So we look forward to doing that and hope you'll see you there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thanks, Karen. We got Halloween right around the corner, and the first event coming up, or we got the pumpkin patch coming up. And then after that, on Friday, October 21st, Glendora Rotary and the Community Services Department will be hosting a movie in the park at Finkbeiner Park. It's going to be on Friday night, October 21st. It starts at dusk, so I would tell people to be there about 6 o'clock. Yep. Because it's getting dark about there now. But the movie is Scooby-Doo 2: Monsters Unleashed. So it'll be fun for everybody in attendance. Just a couple of updates of committees that I represent the city on. The Southern California Association of Governments. I sit on their board, and one of the things, I'm relatively new to this committee, but they typically concentrate on housing, transportation, and public safety. And they made a decision at the last meeting that they're going to be adding water to one of their topics of interest. So it'll be nice to have another ally in the water realm in order to help us lobby Sacramento to start to create some more storage, because as we all know, we went through these droughts a number of times recently, and it's time that we start spending some more money on water infrastructure and try to get some more storage in place. Also wanted to share that the state of California in their latest budget, they've earmarked $246 million available for housing subsidies in the Skag region. Now, whether you agree with subsidies or not, it's available to us. So here at Glendora, we need to be reaching out and trying to figure out what we can do to try to get some of that state money if it's available to us, but that is available and we will be looking into it. Also, putting on another hat, I just got back from a transportation conference in Seattle, the American Public Transportation Association. And just to give a little perspective, when you go up there and you're talking about some of this stuff, 34 million people across the country use public transportation every day. It's about 10% of our population. And if you think about just the working population and the people that are out and about, it's a much higher percentage, but that many people are using public transportation every day. When I flew into Seattle, from the airport, I got on a train. It took me right downtown. I was able to walk across the street to the hotel and to the convention center. And, you know, sometimes Southern California, we're behind when it comes to public transportation. We all know we have the L line coming through town. We need to get used to calling it that, stop calling it the Gold Line. Because if anybody's been watching the news, you know the new K line just opened up that's going to take us from Union Station out to the airport. So we're finally going to have access to the airport from the light rail lines. But one of the things that happened, it's always great to hear the stories from around the country, but there was a gentleman that talked to us a little bit. His name's Terry White. He's the CEO of King County Transportation, which is the county that includes Seattle and Tacoma up in Washington. And he tells a story about when he was a kid, he lived about 4 miles from downtown Seattle. And his mom was disabled, although she worked, but she was not able to drive. So she had to take public transportation to work every day. And because she was unable to drive, she couldn't take the kids anywhere. And so they all used public transportation from a very young age. So to hear a story about somebody that lived about 4 miles from downtown Seattle and grew up using public transportation, and his family survived using public transportation to go on and become the CEO of the County Transportation Authority was pretty impressive. His story was touching. But you know, we all look at public transportation. I know some people think it's a waste of money. Some of us use it out of convenience because it might get us someplace faster. Some of us use it to save money, but we forget there's a lot of people that this is their lifeline. They do not have another way to get from one place to another. So I'll keep representing the city and when it comes to public transportation, but whenever you have the opportunity, I recommend everybody use it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And watch the next Glendoran magazine. There's a column in there about that very thing. Mr. Raymond, anything to report? Mr. Winder, anything else at this time?
No report, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. With that, it takes us to our special items. I understand not only are you undefeated, but you are ranked 4th. And if you win this week, you might be moving up to 2nd. So that is amazing, tremendous. 37-7 win over Glendora High. Congratulations. As I looked through the scorecard that's on the trophy, you know, I was trying to see if you had a little bit of an edge, but it looks like it's pretty much a split. So maybe these next few years you can just continue that and keep that trend going. But we invite you to come on up if you'd like to say a few words, Coach. And then also we invite all the players to come up and we'll take a photo with you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Thank you for inviting us. I'm grateful for us to continue to try to protect and preserve my father's legacy. I come here bittersweet and with a heavy heart because oftentimes when we've been here in the past, my dad and you know, shared a special relationship with each of you. So I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge him. With that in mind, Dr. Kim, our Assistant Superintendent, and district leadership, their unwavering support unconditionally. We continue to elevate the standard because of their presence and their authenticity. I have my principal here, Mr. Doltz, and he too is a parent. His son Trevor is a senior in our program, but again, too, given his background and his history and his commitment to excellence, is just when you have loyal people in your corner, makes my job easy. Ultimately, though, this isn't about me. This isn't about any of the adults. This is about our young men. They just continue to, week in and week out, continue to show the brotherhood and what that means to be a part of our Charter Oak family and the relationships. They work tirelessly. They're committed to one another. I think what I'm most proud of, though, isn't the wins and losses. The wins and losses take care of itself. What I'm most proud of is their character, and what their attributes are and their success outside of football and in the classroom. So they're not just great football players, they're great young men. And I applaud them for that. So on behalf of Charter Oak football, yeah, sure, we'll take the trophy.
Well, I'm just going to humbly accept this on our team's behalf, but I can't thank our head coach, Don Farrar, and our coaching staff enough for the education they give both on the field and off the field to our young men, the lessons that they teach. I'm just grateful that they allow me in the room, half the time. So they really do an incredible job and preaching the character and knowing that, high school football, it's so much more than just what goes on the field, and the character that presents themselves, and knowing that they are, the spotlight's on them as athletes. And when they go outside of our Charter Oak home into the community, the kind of message they want to send and the kind of men they want to be out in the world. And so I'm really appreciative of everything that our coaching staff does with them.
Well, I'm sure Coach Lou is smiling down on the legacy that you've continued and that all of you have continued, and continuing working together as a team and all that you have done in terms of building your character. So please come on up, and I'll invite the council to come out here and we'll take a photo together. So congratulations, sir. Congratulations. Yes. Let's go by the- we'll all put it there. Yeah. See it here. You can fill in here. Yeah, we'll have.
Guys, we got nice.
But you let the principal on the field.
Hold on, Dr. Kim, you gotta get a picture too.
All right. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect. All right. Congratulations.
We're gonna stick out now. We've got homework.
Please.
Appreciate it.
Oh.
Rack. We can go out with this.
Congratulations. It was good seeing you.
Our next special item tonight is in recognition of National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So with that, I will read the proclamation. Whereas October is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and whereas early detection greatly improves the chances for successful treatment and survival, mammography is the best available method of detecting abnormalities, which may be cancer, long before physical symptoms can be seen or felt. And whereas the Glendora Police Department has participated in the Pink Patch Project for the past 7 years in support of organizations that provide education and bring breast cancer awareness to the community. And whereas the Glendora Police Department's Pink Patch Project has raised money by selling customized pink patches and other apparel, they have held fundraisers at restaurants and coffee shops, accepting donations and tips, and raised over $32,000, which has been donated to the City of Hope. And whereas we proudly support studies aimed at discovering better screening methods, developing more effective treatments, and improving our understanding of this disease. Now, therefore, we, the City Council of the City of Glendora, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2022 as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Glendora. We further appreciate the coordinators and supporters of the Pink Patch Project to help promote programs that bring awareness about breast cancer and the importance of consulting with healthcare providers about regular checkups and mammograms. And witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Glendora to be affixed this 11th day of October 2022. And tonight, the queens of the Pink Patch Project are here tonight, Amanda Larson and Julie Vargas. So come on up and tell us a few words, and then we'll give you the proclamation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council, for taking the time to recognize this important project tonight. And thank you so much for wearing your pink in support. I love it. Love it. The Pink Patch Project, as you guys know, is a public awareness campaign designed to raise awareness to the fight against breast cancer. In 2013, it was started by Seal Beach PD when one of their own developed breast cancer, and they decided to turn their patches pink in support. And in 2016, Glendora PD decided to join the fight, and we have been turning our patches pink every October since to raise awareness for women's health and support breast cancer research. And now over 750 agencies across the world are a part of the Pink Patch Project. So it's a huge, great cause. And since 2016, we have been raising money to donate to the City of Hope in support of breast cancer research. And we've been doing so by selling our custom pink patches every year, every October, and t-shirts. And we donate that towards breast cancer research every year.
So this year we have our 2022 Pink Patch. It is on sale in the police department lobby, and you can also get it online, and the link to that store is on our social media accounts. We also this year came up with a new design for a t-shirt. So these are also on sale for $25. We have a few in the lobby of the Glendora Police Department, or you can order this as well as sweatshirts and some other merchandise on that online store. And then our big event is coming up. It's our Pink Patches and Pasta. And that is going to be held on October 27th at 5:30 p.m. through 8:30 p.m. And this is open for anyone if they want to come out and support the PD and the Pink Patch Project. We'll have officers there helping to serve the food, and we'd love to see everyone out there. But thank you so much.
And if you'd like to come up, Chief, since you're flying your pink, you want to come up? Lieutenant, if you want to come up too.
Oh.
All right, very good. That takes us now to our next item, the presentation of the results of the 2022 City of Glendora Community Opinion Survey. And tonight, True North President CEO Timothy McLarney to present.
Good evening.
Are you on?
Council, I'm Dr. Tim McLarney, President of True North Research, and we are a firm that over the last 20 years has had a chance to work with over 1,200 public agencies, more than 400 cities, in using surveys to help them develop a statistically reliable understanding of the communities and the customers they serve. We have also had the privilege of being the City of Glendora's research consultant for your surveys dating back over a decade. And so in tonight's presentation, you'll not only see the results from the 2022 survey, where there are appropriate benchmarks in the past, we're also bringing that data in as well. As I go through tonight's presentation, I welcome questions from council as I go or at the end, whichever is your preference. Next slide, please. So before we talk about the results, helpful to take a brief moment to talk about the purpose of the study as well as the methodology or how we went about conducting the study. In terms of the purpose of the study, I see these community opinion surveys as really being sort of one part needs assessment. What are your residents' needs and priorities and preferences with respect to the services and facilities you provide as a city? It's also one part performance measurement. How well are you as a city performing and meeting residents' needs? Where are you exceeding their expectations, where you're meeting their expectations, and where might there be some room for improvement? And it's also an opportunity to sort of dig in on topics that are of interest to the city at this present moment in time. And so questions about land use, spending priorities, as well as the drought and conservation and the extent to which residents, might see opportunities for additional water conservation, those types of questions, which are very timely. We have a chance to ask those as well. Next slide, please. In terms of the methodology or how we went about conducting the studies, is similar to how we've done it in the last few recent cycles. We start out with using stratified random sampling to choose adult residents of the city of Glendora at random. We wound up speaking with 571 individuals who are adults and live within the city. Once we've sort of selected our sample, we reach out to residents using a combination of 3 methods. We reach out by email, we reach out by text, and we reach out by telephone. That way, if somebody's a habitual call screener and they never pick up their phone, they tend to answer their email. Sometimes we'll see people who have, their email set to Fort Knox, and everything goes into spam, but we're able to reach those people via text, et cetera. So using multiple recruiting methods just gives us multiple shots at reaching respondents and encouraging them to participate. Once we've reached them, they have the opportunity to participate either online at their convenience or by telephone, whichever they prefer. And now, because this was a random sample of 571 adult residents and not a census of all of your adult residents, it has what's known as a margin of error due to sampling. And in this case, that's plus or minus 4%. What that means is we can be 95% confident the results that we'll be talking about tonight are within 4% of what we would have found had we spoken with all of your adult residents. Next slide, please. So we start out, we're on to the results here. So we start out and open the survey with a couple high-level questions about the city of Glendora as a community. And so we ask individuals to rate the city on each of the dimensions you see there on the left side of the slide. And what we find is that you get highest marks for the overall quality of life in Glendora. We had 87% of respondents rate the overall quality of life in the city as excellent or good. Glendora is a place to raise a family, also very high at 84%. As you move down the list, Glendora is a place to retire. You get about 61% who rate that as excellent or good. Everybody knows California is a very expensive place to live. So whether it's Glendora or any other city in Southern California, we tend to see that, once you sort of get to that issue of retirement, there's a certain percentage of folks who are going to feel like it may not be affordable. Glendora is a place to shop and dine. You had about 49% who rated as, 49% who rated as excellent or good. And then finally, as a place to work, that was the softest rating at 34%. But you do see there's a large gray bar off to the right there, the 28% of folks who just don't know enough about it. These are, predominantly your retirees who aren't searching for work in Glendora. If you look at these results over time, that's the next slide, for overall quality of life in Glendora. The next slide, please. What you see is that overall, between 2019 and 2020, we asked the same question in a 2019 survey that wasn't this particular set of topics, but we have this question in it for the city of Glendora. You see a lot of consistency there. We've got, again, about 87% who are saying that they would rate the overall quality of life as excellent or good. It's actually a little bit higher than where we were in 2019 with respect to the percent excellent over time. Next slide, please. So following up those warm-up questions, we had an opportunity to then ask respondents, if the city government could change one thing to make Glendora a better place to live, what change would you like to see? This was an open-ended question, meaning that we didn't present them with the options you see there on the left side of the slide there. We simply let respondents tell us in their own words what change they'd most like to see in Glendora. We went back and reviewed those verbatim responses and grouped them into the categories that you see here. And you see at the top of the list for 2022, addressing homelessness and issues related to poverty at 22%, followed by improving dining and shopping opportunities at 13%. About 13% didn't have an issue that came to mind offhand. And then about 10% were asking, saw sort of opportunities for improving public safety and police services. And then you get down to limiting growth development and preserving the small town feel, around 7%, along with streets and roads and infrastructure. The top 5 have tended to be the same between now and your most recent study. But what we have seen over time is essentially that concerns about limiting growth and development have gone down. Concerns about homelessness have gone up. And also interest in economic development, shopping, and dining have gone up in recent years. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide in some ways is the most important slide in these sort of community satisfaction surveys, and it's the results of the question, generally speaking, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the job the city of Glendora is doing to provide city services? Because we're asking about the city's performance overall, we're not referencing a specific service area like police or streets and roads. It can be thought of as an overall performance rating for the city. And what you see here is you have 80% of respondents who indicated that they are satisfied with the city's overall performance in providing municipal services. You've got about 13% who are dissatisfied, with the rest being not sure, preferring not to answer. On the next slide, it shows kind of how this has changed over time. You know, it's been a very difficult set of years between the last time you did this study in 2018, that was well before the pandemic. You can remember things were very different than they've been over the last few years in a lot of ways, and cities didn't sort of have the same challenges they do today in terms of having to reinvent themselves to provide services, particularly during the heart of the pandemic when it was very difficult to do that. And so we've seen a little bit of a slide in terms of the percent who indicate that they are very satisfied between 2018 and 2022. Overall, though, you see that during the last, in terms of overall satisfaction, you're still up around 80%. Next slide, please. Okay, so that last slide was about the city's overall performance in providing municipal services. In this slide, we break it down now into all of the very discrete service areas that you see here on the slide on the left. And we ask the same basic question: overall, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the city's efforts to provide this service? To allow for an apples to apples comparison across the service areas, we isolate those respondents with an opinion. So if somebody was a not sure, we drop them out, and this allows us to get a apples to apples comparison across the various service areas. And you can see that for all but a few of these services that we tested, you had at least 2/3 of respondents say that they were satisfied with the city's efforts to provide the service. At the top of the list, highest scores were for providing library services, programs for youth, adults, and seniors, police services, as well as providing online access to city services, information, and resources. As you go towards the bottom of the list, there's really sort of one service area that stands out from the rest, and that's addressing homelessness. You had, just about 36% of folks say that they were satisfied with the city's efforts there. This has been a challenging area for a lot of cities, as you know. We had the opportunity actually to do a survey for the city that was focused exclusively on homelessness a few years ago. It's probably going to continue to be one of the more challenging areas moving into the future, but it gives you an up-to-date read. Now, if you compare the results, here's what's really interesting. All of the sort of challenges that have been in place over the last few years, the pandemic just being the start of it, if you look at the answers to how satisfied respondents are in each of these service areas, you only had 2 statistically significant changes when compared to 2018. One change was an increase in satisfaction of 11% for the city's efforts to manage growth and development. And one was a decline of 8% in the city's efforts to maintain park and recreation areas. I can say that maintain park and recreation areas. Sometimes that in recent years has also been a little bit of a proxy for the issues around homelessness, because sometimes those issues can concentrate in parks. For other cities, we've seen that connection. But again, with everything that's been going on, you've only got two statistically significant changes over the last 4 years, which is pretty impressive. Next slide, please. Okay, so the 2020 survey provided an opportunity to look at issues of land use in the city of Glendora and get an understanding of, sort of when residents look around the city, what types of uses do they see that there's too much of? What types of uses do they think it's about right? And what types of uses that are out there that they think we actually need more of in the city of Glendora? And so for each of the uses you see on the left side of the slide, we simply ask them to tell us, is the amount of this amenity or use or business in Glendora too little, about right, or too much? And you can see here, we've sorted them from high to low based on that percentage of folks who said there's not enough. And there's a real appetite for some of these uses, meaning some folks see there's not enough of it in Glendora, they'd like to see more. Fine dining restaurants at the top of that list, you had 57% of residents who said there's not enough of those in Glendora. Affordable housing for middle income families, entertainment options such as movie houses, music and arts, as well as public art and affordable housing for low income families, designated walking areas for biking and hiking, and walking and biking, and then good paying jobs and employment opportunities had about a third of folks say that that's too little. So quite a bit of interest in those amenities. As you go down the list, for everything else on this list, the dominant answer you can see was it's about the right amount. There's only one item here where the percentage of Glendora residents feel like, if there is too, if the balance isn't right, there's actually too much of it as opposed to too little, and that's commercial offices, which is at the very bottom. Next slide, please. So Glendora, like most cities, has a limited budget and probably a very long list of things that you could potentially spend that budget on. And so the survey presents a nice opportunity to ask residents that, given that the city has a limited budget, how would they prioritize among a number of items that some folks would consider discretionary, right? You have the ability, you can spend more money on these items, you don't necessarily have to. And so the list of items we tested is on the left side of the slide there, and we asked response to tell us, should this item be a high priority, a medium priority, a low priority, or not a priority for future city spending? And to encourage some competition, we told them that not everything can be a high priority. And so at the top of the list, you can see there was quite a few respondents who indicated that trails and paths for walking and biking should be at least a medium priority for future city spending. I think got about 80% who rate it that way, followed by having a modern library facilities and acquiring land to create additional parks and green spaces, as well as sports fields that can be used for multiple sports, such as soccer, football, and rugby, and then community gardens for growing food. Those were the items that sort of top the list of those that we tested. As you go down the list, you get towards the bottom, you'll see that, these are items that, most residents did not rate as a medium or high priority. They also, though, happen to be items that are pretty specialized, right? Dedicated pickleball sports, right? So that's a particular court for a particular use. Skate park, same thing. You've got a facility that's all around one type of use. And a bike park, a bike pumps, same thing. And so it kind of makes sense that as you get to the bottom of that list, these are facilities that are really geared toward people who play a very specific sport or activity. And it makes sense that they'd kind of have to be viewed overall as lower priorities. Next slide, please. So about 40% of the respondents that we spoke to in 2022 had contact with city staff in the year prior to the survey. And so among those individuals, we asked them to tell us, given that they'd had contact with city staff, do they think staff was professional, accessible, and helpful? And as you can see here on this slide, staff received very high marks across the board. Again, 97% rate staff as professional. You've got about 94% who rated staff as accessible. You get about 89% who rated staff as helpful. So very good marks, higher than what we sometimes see when we ask this question. Next slide, please. We also asked respondents to about their whether they agreed or disagreed with statements that relate to city government overall. And the statements that you see here on the left are the ones that we asked. I apologize, the actual numbers on this slide are incorrect. I double checked it and realized the report is correct, but for some reason this is a graphic that got pulled from 18 instead of 2022. So this is how you scored in 2018. The good news is when you look at the 2022 numbers, they're actually more positive, and you actually had a couple of statistically significant improvements. So in 2022, the top scoring item there, I trust the city of Glendora, checked in at 79%. You had the city is responsive to residents' needs. That this cycle was actually 69%. The city manages its finances well, 77%. The city is transparent in how it operates at 67%. And then the city listens to residents when making important decisions at 59%. So when you compare this to 2018, you had two statistically significant changes. Both of them were increases. You had an increase of 11%. The city managed its finances well, an increase of 8% in the city operating transparently. Next slide, please. So in addition to some of the other service areas that we talk about in the survey, we also want to dive into topics related to communication. So we asked individuals, first and foremost, overall, are they satisfied or dissatisfied with the city's efforts to share information with them through newsletters, the internet, and other means? You can see here that we had overall 79%, so almost 8 out of 10 respondents say that they were satisfied. Just 15% were dissatisfied, the rest being unsure. If you go on to the next slide here, it shows how this has changed over time. You can see here that the percentage who said that they're very satisfied with the city's efforts to communicate them has drifted downwards over time, but that overall percentage of satisfied has remained pretty steady. What's striking about this graphic is that for most public agencies, when we've asked this communication question over time, the slope of the downward trend has been much steeper. This is an area where, for a variety of reasons over the last 10 years, it's an area where even the highest performing cities tend to struggle a bit. I think it's because residents' expectations for communication have really changed. It's more difficult to reach them because they're in a variety of different channels now instead of being all in the same channels. And so we've just seen this general trend across public agencies where you've asked this question about satisfaction with communication and the scores have dropped off quite a bit. What's striking again about yours is that the scores, although they declined a little bit, they have not declined to like what we normally see. And so you've been able to sort of swim upstream, so to speak, against a lot of these forces out there that are making this slide normally not as positive as you see here. So very good job. Next slide, please. To try and keep ahead of the curve in terms of communication, the survey is also an opportunity to check in with residents and see, of all the ways that the city could reach out to them and to communicate with them, which methods do they think are going to be the most effective. And what's striking here, I've had the opportunity to do this type of work for over 20 years, and for many, many, many years, when you ask this question, the number one issue or the number one communication method was direct mail, right? So newsletters and letters mailed to the home. Things have changed over time, and as you can see here, the top 3 sources in terms of perceived effectiveness for city resident communications are all digital at this point. City website and the electronic and email, electronic newsletters and email being the number 1 and 2, followed by a smartphone app where residents could sort of a little two-way communication between residents and the city. Next slide, please. So one of the new questions for 2022 was we had a series of questions that were focused on issues of water. And so the first question was simply, is California currently experiencing a drought, or are you not sure? Good news is you've got almost 9 out of 10 residents who understand that the California is currently in a drought. You got about 5% who think it's not in a drought, and the rest just not being sure. Next slide, please. We then went on to ask individuals in general, how much attention do you pay to the amount of water your household uses? And here we can see that you have about 91% of respondents we spoke with said that they're at least somewhat attentive to the amount of water their household uses, with 63% professing to be very attentive. These are strong numbers. And next slide. Third question in this series was simply, which of the following best describes your current efforts to conserve water? That they've already done everything they can't do any more. They can do a little bit more, or they can do much more. And overall, you have more than half of your residents say that they can either do a little bit more or they can do much more to conserve water. That's a promising statistic. I know that we've asked this question in a couple other areas of the state, and there was a recent statewide survey where this question was asked, and the percentage of folks who said they can't do anything more was quite a bit higher than what you see here. And so there seems to be a kind of an openness and a willingness among Glendora residents that they could probably, do a bit more to conserve water than they are currently, which is encouraging. So next slide, please. Okay, final slide. What does all this mean? I go into a lot of detail in the full report in the front and the conclusions, and so I'll keep this really brief. Anytime you do a survey like this, it's important to kind of think about the context in which this survey was conducted. And, by pretty much any measure, the years leading up to the 2022 survey have been far more challenging than the years leading up to any of the other prior community surveys for the city of Glendora. We had the pandemic, and it took lives and livelihood. It really forced cities to have to reinvent how they deliver services because many of the traditional ways were just not available during the heart of the pandemic. You had a lot of economic strain during the pandemic. We are still feeling the economic strain out there in terms of things like inflation and interest rates going up, et cetera, high gas prices. We've got the drought. This is perhaps the worst drought that we've seen in our lifetimes. And then obviously in the middle of all this as well, there was a lot of racial tension with the George Floyd killing and the protests and sort of a national reckoning on social justice. And so very turbulent times overall leading up to the 2022 survey. And I mentioned that because with all of that going on, it sort of makes sense. You would think that, it would show up in a bigger way in your results, that there would be sort of more declines in some of the metrics, and we just don't see that. I think the city's done a really good job in sort of swimming upstream against a lot of that and continuing to meet residents' needs during this difficult time. And so, I think you want to see these results, these positive results, as something that is certainly earned, right? They're not just given. If you as a city or a public agency doesn't perform as you should, I promise you it will show up in your survey. And so the fact that with all that going on, the numbers are still really positive in terms of overall quality of life, the city's overall performance, and in providing these services. We saw extraordinarily high ratings for staff's performance when people reach out to staff and ask them for some assistance. This is all really, really good report card on your performance. And as you can see there were some areas in particular that stood out in the bullets under performance strengths, with library services and programs for youth, adults, and seniors, and police services sort of topping that list. So like any customer satisfaction study where you want to know how we're doing now today, and we just talked about that was very positive, you also want to look to the future and see, are there some areas where, all other things being equal, residents kind of identify these as opportunity areas for us to be able to improve our services. And so those areas are the bullets under the opportunity areas that you see there. Addressing homelessness being at the top of the list. We saw that in a couple ways in the survey. It is a bit of an intractable problem, as you know, but it's one that you've got to continue, as other cities are, in figuring out how you can address it as best you can. It is really interesting to see that changes over time, where at certain times in the past, there's been concerns about, the managing growth and development. That's well down the list now compared to where it was. You've got a lot higher satisfaction ratings with the city's efforts in this area. And, now we're starting to see, things like improving dining and shopping, entertainment opportunities, which are kind of economic development, rising up the list as being, some of the even better opportunities for the city looking forward. And so I hope you find the information in this presentation, but in particular the detailed information in the report helpful. And at this point, I will end my presentation. I welcome questions from council if there are any.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all that information and appreciate having the opportunity to work with you again. And those top 3 performance strength areas, Janet, John, and Chief are in the audience. So good job. With that, I will ask council if you have any questions. How did I know that? Mr. Alawas.
You're psychic. Thank you, Timothy, for your report. I always enjoy watching these and going through the numbers and everything. They're amazing. Just some really quick things. On the homelessness, it's a statewide issue. And if that were removed from the survey, would it just be simply a move up, or do you think those numbers would get distributed someplace else?
That's a great question. It's hard to say what the number 2 issue is for people who see homelessness as their number 1, right? It's hard to say how they would repattern in here, and whether they would, would they all go to public safety, or would they split among the shopping and dining? We don't know the answer to that. I will say that one of the things that was kind of interesting, little sidebar, during the middle of the pandemic, for some cities that were still doing their surveys when we're still, had lockdowns and masks and social distancing and the whole thing. COVID, obviously, when you ask this question, would kind of come to the top of the list, right? Like, as a most important issue. When we looked at that result compared to the last time the city had done a survey, what you tended to find was a move up, right? That everything else just shrunk, but the relative ratings of things like public safety and everything else stayed where they were. It's just that the pandemic and COVID was sort of sucking all the air out of the room at that moment in time. So in those cases where I had the direct comparison, it was a move up.
So on the affordable housing, which is a statewide issue, it's just expensive here in California. How does that compare to other cities on the affordable housing? Because we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, what we have, you're not, you're in the same boat, and I think your results on that are kind of similar. When you look around Southern California, what we tend to find is homeless is top of the list. You have issues around affordable housing being, up there. In some ways, when I look down at your sort of, your open-ended questions, the things that stand out about Glendora that make it a little different than most cities is, the number 2 way to improve the city was improving dining and shopping opportunities, right? You don't tend to see that in most cities. So there's more of a demand for economic development in Glendora than we see normally. What you would normally see is that your affordable housing issues would be top 3 and be farther up the list. And so I'm not speaking so much about your bullets here on this slide. I'm speaking about when we had that open-ended question and asked people, what's the number 1 issue? In a lot of cities, you would see affordable housing be a little higher. So it's probably not quite as salient in your community as it is in a few others.
The one item to me that's puzzling is on page 36, listens to residents. What were the qualifiers for that question?
Page 36. Okay, so hold on one second. I think our page numbers might be referring to different things.
That was on your slide that you had here.
Oh, 36 on the slide. I'm sorry. Okay. So there are no qualifiers for this. It's just the flat statement, right? Do you agree or disagree that the city is responsive to residents' needs, that the city manages its finances well, is transparent in how it operates, and listens to residents when making important decisions?
Yeah, it says the city listens to its residents, basically. I mean, that's, we try different methods of communication. And to your point earlier, the apps seem to be the way of the future, it looks like, in smartphones. So is that a direct correlation of maybe not having those apps that they believe that we don't listen to them?
I certainly think the apps are, can help in this. I will say this, these questions here, and we ask similar series in other communities, you got to remember that, we're all taught not to trust government as good American citizens, right? It's part of our political ethos, right? And so when you ask questions about being trustworthy and transparent and all these things, there's sort of a natural knee-jerk tendency for people to say no versus yes. And yet, despite that, you know, you look at this slide, and again, these are the 18 numbers. Your new numbers are better. You know, you have 8 out of 10 residents say that they trust the city of Glendora. That's pretty amazing. You can stack that up. I guarantee you, if you like ask that question about Congress, you ask a question about state government, lots of other layers of government, you don't necessarily get that positive response. And so, I know that these numbers may feel a little softer than you'd like to see them, and it's always important to try and work on that and to try and communicate. But all in all, especially in 2022, those numbers were good and trending up.
So last question for you is, how many cities do you perform surveys for, and how does Glendora rank in that grouping? Overall satisfaction.
Yeah, to date, remember this spans over 20 years, right? So to date, I've conducted more than 400 surveys like this for cities in the state of California. Some of these are repeat clients that I've worked with for over 20 years. I've worked with Glendora, obviously, for 10. If I back away from that, think about the timing of where we are now relative to what we see in other cities, I think your numbers are certainly, they're up there with some of the stronger numbers that we see. There was a time back in the day for a number of cities where, you'd see some cities where they're getting satisfaction ratings in kind of the mid 90s. It's been a very long time since I've seen that. Most cities that I've worked with, the high performing cities, they're in the 80s, which is where you're at. So, I think this comfortably places you among, the better cities.
Great. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Mr. Friedel.
Thank you, Timothy. And my greatest takeaway is you've given us a wonderful tool to refer to as we start our new strategic plan and budgeting for the next cycle. So what a great measurement and a good heads up on what we need to focus on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Question about the chart for the spending priorities. Was that an open-ended question, or were there choices there?
Yeah, they were presented with each one of those choices or those items and simply asked, should this be a high, medium, or low priority for future city spending, or should the city not spend any money on that item? And we did ask them to keep in mind that not everything could be a high priority. And so the one thing I will say is, there are probably some items on that list that don't score as well in terms of a priority. It doesn't mean that some of the folks who didn't rate it as a medium priority or high priority don't want it. It's just that we purposely introduced some competition into this so they don't say that everything's a high priority.
The improved trails, walking and biking was a little shocking that there's that many people that feel there's an interest in that, because I know when I'm out on trails, I'm not seeing a whole lot of people using them. So it could very well be that, they're looking for something different than what we have available. But no, I was just curious as to those. And then the other question, unfortunately, we got to face it. We're seeing a downward trend in satisfaction. And is that something that you're seeing statewide when you do these surveys?
Short answer is yes, for the most part. We have seen that. Sometimes it's more pronounced, right, than what we're seeing here. I think, again, there's been sort of this trend, sort of a long-term trend, and then you have this issue of what's happened in the last few years in terms of the circumstances being a lot more challenging. And so some cities have done better through that period than others. I think your scores, again, put in context, are in some ways better than I expected. When I got them back, I thought maybe it's been 4 years since we last did this study. So much has happened. I was sort of bracing myself for scores that might be lower than this. So I was kind of encouraged, even though that downward trend was there, it's not as steep as it could be.
Do you do surveys outside the state of California?
Not often. So I don't have any of this type of survey. You know, we're doing surveys in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California right now, but they're not this type of survey. They're for a different planning effort.
Oh, okay, I appreciate it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, thank you. Thank you again for all of your time and effort and your continued work with us. And as Mr. Friedendahl said, this gives us a great framework for our strategic planning. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, that takes us on to our next special item tonight, an overview and update on the Independent Cities Risk Management Authority, also known as ICRMA, which is the city's general liability insurance program. And tonight, to tell us all about it, is Interim Executive Director John Nielsen. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. I certainly appreciate the deft delegatory skills of your city manager. I wish I had a staff member here I could call upon to make this presentation as well. I did start my career in city management, and that evolved into a career in pool management. You're part of a JPA. Next slide, Lorena. A Joint Powers Insurance Authority. This authority was created in 1980. And Glendora became a member of it in 1986. You've been a long time loyal member of this program, and we thank you for that support. Next slide, please. Across the state of California, there are about 150 such entities, and nationwide, you're looking at something like 450 to 500 such entities. I've had the pleasure of managing 7 such organizations in Minnesota, in Ohio, in New York, and also here in California. 50 of the 150 JPIAs in California are accredited by the California Association of Joint Powers Authorities. So what is ICRMA? It's an alliance, next slide, please, Marina. A group of 15 cities in Los Angeles, San Bernardino, and Orange counties. We offer broad coverage in a variety of coverage areas. We have 4 self-insured programs that include liability, workers' compensation, property, and auto physical damage. And as you can see on the final bullet, we also offer some group purchase programs that are effectively first dollar insurance for which there's no risk sharing going on amongst the member participants. The top 4 that I mentioned before, there is risk sharing. There are Glendora dollars that are being put in a common fund and used to pay claims for all the other members. When you have a claim, some of those funds will come back to Glendora to pay your claims. Next slide, please. There's a listing of our ICRMA members. I'm not going to dwell on that much, but you can see who the other members of the group are. Next slide, please. The purposes of ICRMA were to assure the availability of property and casualty insurance. When you joined in 1986, California and the nation was in the midst of an insurance crisis, very challenging time when insurance was not available really at any price. You saw a lot of municipal swimming pool operations shut down or take out their diving boards, things like that, because they presented obvious risk and there was no insurance to protect cities against them. It was a time when there were a lot of pools created here in California, and that's really where ICRMA came from, albeit an insurance crisis earlier. There was an insurance crisis in workers' compensation that happened in the late 70s and early 80s, and that's what led to the creation of ICRMA. We also want to help members in improving their risk management policies, procedures, and services. And we have been, through the pool, able to provide greater control to the members in controlling the outcomes of litigation and claim settlement activities. Next slide, please. The organization is governed by a board, the equivalent of city council. It's basically a council manager form of government, if you will, with me sitting in the role of interim executive director. The unique part about this is that there are no employees of ICRMA. We're all contractors. And my company, Risk Program Administrators, is a division of Arthur J. Gallagher and Company. We are responsible for the day-to-day administration of the program. And I've listed just a few of the very important service providers that effectively act as department directors for the organization. Next slide, please. We have a lot of important weight in areas of always operating with transparency, with honesty and integrity. We subject ourselves to an annual financial audit. There are also, in alternating years, claims audits of our workers' compensation and liability programs. And I mentioned earlier, one of those 50 pools that are accredited in California. In our case, we're an even further subset. We're accredited with excellence, which gets you down to about the top 30 pools in the state of California. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about what we expect from you, which we think is an important part of this dynamic. It really is a partnership between you and the other member cities that are part of the program. Each member agrees to participate on our board of directors. You are very well represented by Belinda Ochoa, your risk management administrator. She's doing an excellent job representing the city's interests, and we enjoy working with her. I'm here tonight at the invitation of Marie Ricci, your Director of Administrative Services. And she and I have had some conversations about some recent loss trends that I'm going to talk about next. But we do appreciate that invitation to come before City Council and talk about those things. You also owe a duty to the organization to promptly report claims, to cooperate in the investigation of claims, to periodically provide us with underwriting data, and participate actively in loss control programs. Next slide, please. I'm not going to jump into these, but I'm going to point to just a couple of items. The city retains a risk, a member retain limit, or a deductible, if you will, of $250,000 per claim for a liability loss and $500,000 per occurrence for a workers' compensation loss. The other details of the program are shown there, and you can review those at your leisure. We do provide a $35 million limit per occurrence for a liability claim and to California statutory limits for workers' comp. Next slide, please. This next slide just simply shows the skin in the game that you have with us, a little over $2.5 million a year in the 8 different programs that make up the program. About 80% of your costs are in the liability program, which is really our main program. All right, the last few minutes I want to spend tonight have to do with some highlights about the liability program and the workers' comp program. Next slide, please. Currently, as I mentioned, you have a $250,000 retention or deductible for liability claims. That was a fairly recent change, mostly due to the fact you've had some good loss history historically that would qualify you to participate at that level. That is our lowest retention level that we currently offer. Previously, you're at $300,000 per claim. Unfortunately, in the last several years, there have been some negative claim trends. I would say partly due to the fact that you've dropped down your retention a little bit. There's therefore a greater likelihood that you'll have claims that happen within that layer, as opposed to if you'd taken a higher retention level, you would have avoided some of those claims. You would have fully self-funded them, if you follow me. The ICRMA cost allocation formula, it's important for you to understand, is heavily tilted towards losses. About 70% of your premium is calculated based upon your relative losses. And it's I guess, qualified by your size, the amount of risk that you bring in. So it's not just your pure losses, but based on different ratios that tie to how many police officers you might have or what the city's population might be, et cetera. 30% is tied directly to those exposure values, and your losses stay with you for a 10-year period. It's a little bit different from how commercial insurance works, which usually looks at a 5-year profile of loss horizon of how your premiums might be calculated. In this case, your losses stay with you for a little bit longer. If you had good loss experience, that also stays with you for a little bit longer. For the most recent analysis, which is based on loss data through June 30th of this year, the frequency and severity claims has improved modestly compared to the prior year. And we are suggesting, as one of the recommendations we're making tonight to you and the city staff, that the city may wish to consider a somewhat higher liability retention in future years. You may want to raise your deductible, if you will. It's not something we can calculate on the back of an envelope. That takes some actuarial analysis, work with our brokers to a certain extent to determine what the appetite of that would be for our reinsurance carriers. But it's something that we think you should definitely explore, particularly if you're facing some limitations in budget. It may be wiser to bet on yourselves, bet on your own loss experience and good performance that you've historically had, and reduce some fixed costs that you would pay to ICRMA in the form of premiums and take a little more risk in your own loss fund. We also would suggest that you look at a couple of important areas as you focus on risk control efforts, particularly with regard to police use of force claims, with regard to hazardous conditions, particularly of roadways and sidewalks, and always employment practices claims. Your HR department is one of the most important functions of your local government. Turning to the workers' comp program, again, you retain $500,000 of risk for this program per occurrence. The allocation formula is identical effectively to how we calculate those claims or those contribution costs for liability, heavily tilted towards losses. The good news is, again, losses have improved in the most recent year. You're doing particularly well in terms of your risk financing of the workers' compensation risk. And in that $500,000 deductible level, you've only had one claim since 2004, which is outstanding. Over the last 5 years, Glendora has averaged about 26 workers' compensation claims per year, so about 2 per month, and about 75% of those claims come from your police department. 22% come from public works, and the balance of just 2 or 3% comes from all of their departments. We have looked at your loss data and determined your most common injuries are from strains, abrasions, and bruises, making up about 54% of all the claims. The most frequent body parts that are affected are multiple body parts, knees, lower backs, fingers, and hands, reflecting about 50% of all your claims. We would encourage your risk management department and the departments that work with them to focus on those areas to reduce losses in the future and thereby reduce your premiums and contributions to our program and save monies out of your own loss fund. With that, I'll just tell you with the last slide that there's some information about some risk control programs, resources that ICRMA provides to you. These are comprised of local services that we can deliver to you directly, as well as regional services that are offered through seminars, webinars, and other types of risk management conferences. So again, thank you for your time. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Friedendahl, any questions?
Thank you, John. Question I have goes back to the pool membership opportunity. And your group, if I'm heard correctly, is a membership of 15 cities?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there an opportunity, I guess, cherry picking, if you will? Can we hang out with the good guys and be with cities that have less loss or better ratios? Is that an opportunity, or are we part of that membership and that's our team?
Well, I would describe it this way. You're part of that team. At the same time, there are incentives, both penalties and rewards for those that perform well, to incentivize you to stay in the program. Even if you're the best city in the group, you're gonna get some credits that would substantially improve your opportunity to limit the amount of contributions that you make to my organization. And again, pay out of your own loss fund for your self-insured retention. The pool does have an interesting growth. We have a strategic planning retreat coming up over the next 2 days. We'll be down at Hermosa Beach, and I am already quite aware that growth is going to be one of the things that we'll be talking about. I believe, are going to be recommending some strategies to the membership and getting some feedback that will result in a new membership growth and planning process. We'll primarily be suggesting to our membership that the best way to grow is essentially through networks that the city has. So if there is a neighboring city, maybe a city that some of your key staff has recently come from, where we think that there are some good risks, those are the types of cities that we'd like to add to our program.
Okay, and having spent some time in risk management in my former lives, I understand it. It's expensive. It's time taking to do it, but the dividends pay back tenfold. So it's a good investment. And many businesses forego that until they start paying heavily. So let's not take the foot off the gas on that, but keep that as a high priority. So thank you, John.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Alamas.
Thank you, Mayor. One question. Thank you, John, for your presentation. Is there, if the whole group or the pooling of cities do well at the end of a certain time frame, is there any dividend given back to the cities?
There is. We actually have program years. We have fund year accounting so that we can monitor how many claims have been paid against a particular program year. We have essentially equity positions that each member has in those program years. Your contributions make a percentage of a total. To the extent that when a loss year closes out, and that may be 10 or 12 or 15 years down the road, but when a loss year closes out, whatever amount of money is left over, let's say it's $1 million, just making up a number, and you have 10% of the equity in that year, you'd be entitled to a $100,000 dividend returned back to you. We periodically do close out loss years. In fact, for our property and our property and auto physical damage program a year ago, we returned to the members something like $700,000 in surplus funds that went back to the members.
Okay, so we received some dividend back.
You have that ability. Can't guarantee every year you're going to get a dividend, but as loss years close, you have that entitlement.
Thank you, John.
You bet.
Thank you again for being here tonight and for sharing all that information with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, that takes us to the consent calendar. Items 8 through 11 can be approved with one motion unless anyone wishes to pull or make comment on any of those.
Mayor, I move consent items 8 through 11.
Okay, very
I will
good.
second.
Thank you. That is a motion by Councilmember Alabas, a second by Councilmember Friedendahl. I will open up the vote on base and do a roll call. Councilmember Alabas,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes.
Mayor Davis,
Yes.
and that passes 4-0. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, that takes us to member agenda items, which we have none. Next, unfinished business. Item 12, update on unscheduled vacancies on the Water Commission and also for the Planning Commission and Business Improvement District Advisory Board. And tonight to report on that, Deputy City Clerk Records Manager, Ms. Dominguez. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Before you this evening, we bring a report on the recruitment efforts currently underway for 3 of our boards and commissions. As you recall, in August, we came to the council with a report on 2 vacancies in our Water Commission from Commissioner Fields and Commissioner Shaw. And subsequent to that, we, upon request from the council, extended the deadline for recruitment for that. After that meeting, we received notifications from Planning Commissioner and a BID board member of their resignations to those. So we issued notices of unscheduled vacancies for those 2. Following the deadlines of those 2 notices, I do want to mention that notices were pursuant to Government Code 54974. Following the deadline of all 3, about those 2 notices for the 3 commissions and board vacancies, we present to you the applicants that are eligible for appointment to those positions. And we are requesting that you review and discuss options at this point. First of which is to direct the city clerk to extend the application deadline for current vacancies and to continue the recruitment effort. The second would be to direct the city clerk to schedule a special meeting for October 25th to start at 5 o'clock to conduct interviews. The third of which would be that since there are the number of applicants equal to the number of vacancies in the Business Improvement District of 1, to appoint applicant Matthew Davis to office number 3. Since the number of applicants exceeds the number of vacancies in the Water Commission and Planning Commissions, to utilize the formal balloting process and conduct balloting procedures to fill the unscheduled vacancies on the Water Commission offices number 3 and 4, and the Planning Commission office number 4. And the fourth option would be to provide direction. So that concludes my report. I'm available to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Friedendahl.
Thank you. Having reviewed the applicants and a couple of options where there are exceeding numbers, I think we've met them, so would make sense. I would like to move we go with option 3 and do a vote tonight.
And thank you. Mr. Alawas.
I would be in favor of appointing Michael Holmes to the Water Board and appoint Matthew Davis to the Business Improvement District, extend the application deadline to October 21st for all open positions, and direct the city clerk to conduct a special meeting at 5 o'clock on October 25th.
All right. Well, Mayor Pro Tem. I think we've had two motions made with no seconds. So we'll
I don't know
see
that
if
was a
you
motion, that was an
can,
idea.
if you have a third. So let's see, go for it.
What's the purpose of the special meeting?
To have the interviews with the other folks.
For the
who-
people you didn't appoint.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
because it's at 5 PM, so it has to be classified as a special meeting. It's a council day,
Okay.
just 5 PM start time.
Okay, you're gonna make a third.
I do
Let's
want
have
to
it.
quickly mention, though, that you did interview several of those previously.
But it was
and
it was
s-
a while ago, though.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I can agree with going ahead and appointing Matt. I think with the other two positions, it would. Honestly, I remember a couple of them, but I don't remember all of the applicants.
That's why it'd be
I,
good to
I,
refresh.
I think it would be important to interview, even though the interviews would probably be very short, all of the applicants again for the Water Commission and Planning Commission.
Okay, so you did have a third option.
Yeah.
So
actually.
we have Mr. Friedendahl suggesting that we go ahead and ballot. Mr. Alawas is appointing some people, having a special meeting to interview others. You're suggesting that we appoint Matthew Davis, no relation, and that then we have a special meeting to interview the other people.
But you want to also appoint Michael Holmes too, though, right? For water.
That's not what he said.
But I
That's
want
not what I
clarification.
said. I mean, we know Michael, he'd be a good choice, but I don't think it's appropriate to appoint him without an actual interview.
you want
So
my
I
opinion
will
then, huh?
second your compromise of appointing Matthew Davis to the bid and meeting at 5 PM on the 25th to interview the individuals for the other position, or refreshing everyone's memories of who these candidates are.
Because some of these guys will walk in the door and I'm going, okay, now I remember.
Well, and
Right.
also Mr. Thompson would be available for that
Yeah,
too, to be
yeah, he
able to
would- he'd be
participate
available
in
to
this
participate
appointment,
in
which
it.
I think for me, that's another factor that I think is important to allow Mr. Thompson to have a voice in this.
So Mendel, what do you think? I'm good with it. Okay.
Just to
And how is that
clarify,
different? No.
What?
just to clarify, is this going to be also to extend the recruitment deadline, to reopen the recruitment deadline? Or are we going to just schedule that special meeting for the 25th to interview?
Yeah, schedule me for the 25th,
Okay.
right?
Is that what?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I would say we just need to schedule it. We've already
Yes.
extended the,
The only difference from my motion is you're just not going to appoint one person.
right.
That's okay. It can be different.
Yeah, Gary is different. I'll give him that.
This is why we don't have short agendas.
Okay, so do you need that as a formal,
So
Mayor
yes,
Pro Tem has made the motion. I've seconded it. So
correct. Okay, so that is, I'm going to go ahead and open it if Mayor Pro Tem would want to motion that on base. There we go. And is there a second to Mayor Pro Tem's motion? That was from Mayor Davis. And that is to appoint Matthew Davis to the Business Improvement District and to schedule a special meeting to interview for Water Commission and Planning Commission applicants on October 25th. I'm gonna,
At 5 o'clock.
at 5 o'clock, thank you. I'm gonna do a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes.
and Mayor Davis.
yes.
Thank you. That passes 4-0.
All right, thank you very much, Elvia. All right, that takes us to new business, which we have none. Members, closing comments. Mr. Alawas,
None, thank you.
Mr. Friedendahl,
None, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Raymond, Chief, Mr. Lopez, Mr. Aguirre, Mr. Ricci, Mr. Winder.
No, thank you, Mayor.
All right, with that, we are adjourned at 8:38 PM.